Hi, friends. Hi, Dolores. Hi, Steve. Thanks for sharing, everybody. Happy Friday the 13th. It was a really unlucky day, wasn't it? Considering that we heard the news, the Labor Party's lost in the UK. Lana says, sounds like you have a fan on. Yes. Let me see if I can turn that down a bit. I don't have a fan on. It's probably the system fan. And I can't do really much about that, since without that working, I would get an overheating of the machine. I think after a while it's going to decline, but hang on a second, let me see if I can do something to turn it down. No, I don't think there's much I can do. I have high CPU by usage right now, and that's probably what's causing the fan. Steve says, yikes, in this moon. Kay says, I did not get a notice tonight that you were on. Glad to see you, Joe. And hi, Kay. I'm going to make sure that from now on you get a notice before I go on. How about that, Kay? Steve says, can't share you the group stock. Facebook jail, sorry. That's okay, Steve. I understand perfectly well. That's a danger we all face. Even Dr. Joe has the echo tonight. I don't know, Russ. You tell me. How's the echo tonight? And Lana and Steve and Barbara Reed, okay, have joined. Hi, Barbara. Hi, Lana. Bonnie's joined. Hi, honey. And Lana says the echo is back. Where could it be coming from? I'll check my camera. The camera's properly set. It shouldn't be causing anything at this point. Oh, wait a minute, let me see. Well, I cut off the Facebook sound. The fan has quieted down a little bit now. Maybe the echo's a little better too. Definitely got an echo. Richard's joined. Yes, there's an echo tonight. Hey, everyone else here tonight. Not too bad. I know we can still hear you. Just wondered if you had a separate fan on. No. No separate fan. I'll turn down the mic a little bit. Maybe that will help. How's that, everybody? Is the echo less? Nikki King. Hi, Nikki. Hi, Barbara. Russ says there's a hiss in the background foreground. I think that's coming from the fan. Okay, let's go ahead. Maybe this will go better as we go forward. Well, I'm sorry for the noise. I'll try to think it through as we go forward and see if I cannot do anything to fix it up. Let me try that. How's that? Okay, did what I did now just help? Much better. Thank you, Barbara. Okay, that's good, I think, then. The white noise is gone. Very good. Very good. Very good. What the hell happened in Great Britain? That's the first thing we're going to talk about. And there's an article that appeared already in Common Dreams about it. Let's shift over to that. And then I'll comment on the article as we go forward with it. I'll put it, though, in the American context because the implications for us are already being drawn by our beloved centrist the politicians and neoliberal media. So this is an article that appeared in Common Dreams by Jake Johnson, the staff writer. Today, December 13th, the title is Biden Parrots Profoundly Silly Narrative. That lesson from the UK elections is Democrats should not go so far left, quote unquote. That very last. And then there's a picture of Smokey Joe. I like to call him Smokey Joe. It's one of my old timey nicknames for Joe Biden. Maybe because I always picture him as getting hot under the collar about something or other. But anyway, former Vice President Joe Biden Thursday night told a gathering of rich donors that the Labour Party's crushing defeat in the UK general election represents a warning sign that Democrats should not nominate a left-wing candidate in 2020, which, of course, is a narrative that was immediately condemned by progressive commentators as highly misleading and pernicious. No kidding. Quote, suffice it to say that Boris is kind of like Trump and Corbyn is kind of like Sanders. So tonight's results mean that Sanders would be a bad nominee is a profoundly silly and unserious take, unquote. That's a quote from Angus Johnston of the City University of New York. And quote again, look what happens when the Labour Party moves so far to the left, unquote, said Joe Biden. quote, it comes up with ideas that are not able to be contained within a rational basis quickly, unquote. And quote again, you're also going to see people saying, my God, Boris Johnson, who is a kind of physical and emotional clone of the president, is able to win, unquote, the former vice president said, according to pool reports. Biden's remarks mirrored the immediate post-election reaction of centrist pundits on Twitter late Thursday. Exit polls made clear that Labor, led by Jeremy Corbyn, lost decisively, and people were tweeting, this is a warning to Dems flirting with Bernie or Warren. Oh, God. Here we go with the left can't win takes. The UK political situation, while similar in some ways to the US, is also massively different to the US on so many other levels. For the start, the US isn't trying to leave the EU. Anyways, the UK result is depressing all around, tweeted Mehdi Hassan last night. The argument by this fellow Krauscher, echoed by many on social media, was soon expressed on Friday morning news headlines and television programs. Quote, Bernie's consistently polls better than Trump is extremely popular, and there's no analogous issue to Brexit. And quote, Corbyn's UK defeat was bad news for Sanders, Warren, and America's left, blared NBC News. Quote, first read, unquote, headline on the UK election results. Of course, Chuckles Todd, Mark Murray, and Carrie Dan were there to tell us that last night's election showed the limits of campaigning and winning on ideology, as if Joe Biden is not campaigning on ideology. Of course, we hope he's campaigning and losing on ideology, as opposed to campaigning and winning on ideology, but that's another question. But continuing the quote from Chuckles and Mark and Carrie, quote, a socialist or very left-leaning message inspired to turn out young voters and unite the working class simply didn't work, unquote. Well, of course, this election was about Brexit. People wanted to get rid, of Brexit. And the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, made a fatal error in not continuing with their earlier stance of we will respect the democratic will of the people and we're going to implement the verdict of the people, which was Brexit. Jeremy Corbyn and Labour should have been unceasingly loyal to those original statements, of Labour's. They should have opposed the kind of Brexit that Boris Johnson wanted, but they also needed to say, we definitely are going to have Brexit sooner rather than later, and one way or another we're going to do it because that was the verdict of the voters in the referendum. We're going to respect that. Now, since we agree with the Tories, on that Brexit is absolutely necessary, and with Nigel Farage, that Brexit is absolutely necessary, and we promise to implement Brexit. There's no difference between us and the other parties in relation to Brexit. Now let's talk about issues that are more relevant for a general election. And then, of course, he could have gone ahead and campaigned on his manifesto. On his manifesto. The problem was, in the run up to the election, he took this really, really strange, neutral position that was difficult to explain to people and that looked like, to long-time labor supporters, that labor was waffling on its earlier commitments, and also made it appear to them that labor had become a metropolitan party that no longer cared about the northern industrial labor centers inside of the UK, that labor had abandoned them. So they in turn decided they were going to abandon labor. Anyway, in his reality check segment on Friday morning, CNN's John Avlon stated, as if it were a political truism, that, quote, right-wing populism beats left-wing populism, unquote. Quote, Democrats should be paying close attention to the Labour Party's brutal beating in the UK elections last night because it's a cautionary tale as they prepare for the 2020 primaries, said Avlon. Polls show that Labour should have been poised to take back 10 Downing Street. They decided to stick with an unreconstructed socialist Jeremy Corbyn, unquote. That is not what happened. What happened is that Jeremy Corbyn decided to play it cute in relation to his earlier position. He had changed his position since he took over the Labour Party. He changed the position of the Labour Party. He moderated the position in order to conciliate the portions of the party that wanted to remain. And to conciliate them, he tried to take a neutral stance and to propose a second referendum, which he then would appeal to if it had the same result as the first of the referendum. But this made him unpopular with traditional labor strongholds, places that had voted for labor for 90 years. 90 years. Anyway, progressives and other critics were quick to push back against effort to use Corbyn's loss as a cudgel against Sanders and Warren, noting that there are unique political dynamics in the UK, particularly polarization over Brexit, and Corbyn's deep unpopularity make such comparisons absurd and dishonest. And why was Corbyn increasingly unpopular as we approached this particular election? Because, of course, the British media were continually propagandizing against him, much in the way that, but even worse than what they're doing with Sanders right now, but also because Corbyn was making himself unpopular by not continuing to support the Brexit position. If he had gone with Brexit, he could have implemented a Brexit and then turned towards a much more radical MMT position and run riot with a socialist agenda in the UK, making him deeply popular very, very quickly. But anyway, speaking to reporters in the Oval Office on Friday, Trump himself seized on the UK election as a possible, quote, harbinger of what's to come in our country, unquote. Quote, it was last time, unquote, Trump said, referring to the British public's vote to leave the EU just months before the 2016 by U.S. presidential election, which again had nothing to do with the result of the presidential election, except insofar as Hillary Clinton was supporting international trade deals. In some ways, quite similar to the trade deals that Trump is supporting now. Deals that made him unpopular in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Michigan and in many other heartland states. I'm sorry, that made Hillary Clinton unpopular in those states. Commentators were quick to note that unlike Corbyn against Johnson, Sanders has polled favorably against Trump in hypothetical general election mashups. In a sharply worded video post online late Thursday night, historian and political observer Christo Avalos offered a rebuttal point by point to anyone trying to use Corbyn's defeat as an attack on Sanders. And you can access this. Okay, the link to it is in the article. The video, okay, is in the article. I'm not going to play the video for you, but the three basic reasons were Bernie consistently polls better than Trump. He's extremely popular, and there's no analogous issue to Brexit. And the third reason cited in the video is that the polls, which had been way off the mark in 2017, had been continuously showing this time that Corbyn's unpopularity was going to be extremely significant in the December 2019 election. And they predicted in a consistent way that there would be a big victory for the Conservatives. Now, not quite as big as it was, but still a very substantial victory that would give them a majority. So the third factor was the accuracy of the polls. Okay, in this case, Sanders' performance in the polls was the second factor, and also no Brexit. Now, I would add also a fourth factor, and I think that fourth factor is very important. We often point to the fact that it's really nice with respect to the UK because their elections only take a few weeks usually. Okay, and this election period was very rapid. Okay, it was only a few weeks since the right to have an election was won by Corbyn in Parliament due to his getting the support of the Liberals, who, by the way, were slaughtered in this election also. So they pulled a really silly tactic. Then Corbyn had to go over supporting Johnson also to call a very quick election. And then that very quick election was very much against what Corbyn had to do, because Corbyn had a complex position when it came to Brexit. He needed a much longer time to explain the complexities of his position to people and to get over their initial very negative reaction to the position he was taking with respect to Brexit. And he didn't have that time because the elections there are so short. But in this election, okay, in our election, Bernie has been campaigning all this year explaining his positions, explaining Medicare for all and why it's better, and continuing to explain it state by state with lots and lots of retail politics and with polls supporting the position, okay, of Medicare for all, generally speaking. Now, the polls have been declining a bit, okay, in recent months because Medicare for all has been under consistent and heavy attack from the centrists in the race. Warren has been waffling, and of course, there have been some union attacks, okay, as well, because some of the union people, okay, are perceiving that they want to protect the gains in health insurance that they've won over a period, okay, of years. Now, they are very silly, and we can show why and explain why, okay, some other time. But the fact is, this has been hurting support for Medicare for all, okay, a bit. But that doesn't also speak to the fact that here Bernie has time to counterattack and to get the Medicare for all issue more and more popular again. And the counterattacks have started, and the political positioning of some of the people who have been engaging in the attacks is now beginning to fall back, especially with respect to Buttigieg, okay, and with respect to Elizabeth Warren also. Her waffling, okay, on Medicare for all has been causing her to lose a lot of support. So the point is, this is a case where the length, okay, of our election season is actually benefiting Bernie Sanders because he's had a lot more time to sell his positions to the American people, and he will continue to have that time. And by the time he is nominated in the summer, very much of the American public will be very familiar with his positions and his particular stances. And when the election itself actually comes around, there will have been months more in which he is able to explain why his positions on the issues are infinitely superior to Trump's, and Bernie, of course, will run stubbornly an issue-oriented campaign completely and will direct the whole campaign towards an issue-oriented campaign. And he is very skilled at that. Corbyn wasn't able to do this in the short time available in the UK. So that's a fourth difference, and it's a very big difference, not called out by Christo Avalis. So I think that fourth difference is critical. I think Bernie's been very successful in selling positions much more progressive to the American public over the last year, and that he will continue to be even more successful. Comparisons to the UK are inevitable but lazy, said Adam Gentleson, Public Affairs Director at advocacy group Democracy Forward. If you're going to do it, you have to grapple with the fact that Corbyn was deeply unpopular, whereas Biden, Bernie, and Warren all rank about the same on but favorability. But Biden is again starting to slip, and recent poll, of course, shows that he's slipping in South Carolina, and that Bernie has started now to approach him, even in South Carolina, which in the early states was going to be his firewall. Angus Johnston, professor at the City University of New York, also pointed out that Sanders' overall favorability rating among the U.S. electorate is far higher than Corbyn's in the UK. Suffice it to say that Boris is kind of like Trump, and Corbyn is kind of like Sanders, so tonight's results mean that Sanders would be a bad nominee, quote unquote, is a profoundly silly and unserious take, Johnston wrote in a series of tweets on Thursday night. And Johnston gave some figures that Bernie Sanders' approval rating average is -3, while Donald Trump's approval rating average is -11, and Boris Johnston's approval rating average is -12, and Jeremy Corbyn's approval rating average was -40 in the UK. Now, I think that Bernie's approval rating average, as people drop out of the campaign, Bernie's approval rating average is only going to go up and up and up. I don't think that's going to happen with Donald Trump's approval rating average. I think that under the strength of Bernie's attacks and what's going to go on in the real world between now and then, I think Trump's approval rating average is only going to go down and down, okay, and down. So, The Intercept's Glenn Greenwald wondered why, quote, Corbyn's defeat in Brexit complicating UK proves the left can't win in the US, but the stunning victory by Argentina's leftists Fernandez Kirchner ticket doesn't show that undiluted leftism is necessary to win? Question mark. And he goes on to point out, quote, maybe people are manipulating inapplicable results for their own ends, unquote. And quote again, if you're going to exploit foreign election outcomes to try to bolster your own ideological preferences in the U.S., try not to be so glaringly selective in how you do it. The left is winning in many places. You need to grapple with those victories too, unquote. And I couldn't agree more with Glenn. In order to assess the overall situation, you have to grapple with both successes and failures across the board, and not just cherry-pick things that favors your own argument. But apart from this comment even, the circumstances here in the United States are unique and are different. And one of the circumstances, okay, which is different, which I failed to mention before, but which is very important, in the UK, the people already have the NHS, and they love the NHS. They didn't really believe that this election was about the privatization of the NHS. If they believed that, Johnson would have lost hands down. If they really believed he was going to privatize it and that he was going to hand it over to American private interests, I don't think Johnson would have had a chance in hell. But they perceived this as a Brexit election. Corbyn was not able to turn them away from that. But because they have the NHS, they have something very valuable which the people in the United States don't have. Even when we get a Medicare for All program, which we're going to get soon, I think, we still won't have what the UK people have now. So the point is, there's reason for the people of the United States to gravitate towards Bernie Sanders because of the extreme benefit they will get from a Medicare for All bill. Whereas in the UK, the UK people already have that. So they're looking, okay, at other issues. They're looking at something they want right now, and which the elites have been denying them in the UK, and that is Brexit, and that was what was uppermost in the minds of the majority. That, I think, is what happened there. So, I provided two additional reasons why the situation in the United States is different from the UK, and those reasons are the length of the campaign here, giving Sanders an ability to persuade people and convince people, and in addition, apart from the length of the campaign, the fact that he can offer them an improvement in their medical care, that he can offer them a great improvement in their security. And of course, there's also his very aggressive Green New Deal program as well, in a situation when more and more people are perceiving the importance of the Green New Deal to their futures, okay, and their lives here. So Bernie is at the forefront, okay, of everything here. Corbyn is at the forefront, okay, of many things there, policy-wise. But he was not at the forefront when it came to Brexit, which is something that they've now made clear they really wanted. So I think that Jeremy Corbyn just misjudged the situation, miscalculated it, and that he was pulled by his party into an untenable position, and he allowed that to happen. Maybe he wasn't sufficiently in touch with his base. I don't know. That's very possible. But Bernie has been campaigning all over the country for months and months and months, and you can bet he's in touch with his base. He's got nearly 5 million individual donations now. He'll hit the 5 million mark soon. He's got more than 1 million volunteers. And he's retail politicking all over the United States, not staying at home like Joe Biden, who's afraid to go out there and make a fool of himself. Next. So that's why I think that the lesson that the center wants to make out of what happened in the UK is a silly lesson for by U.S. politics. And I think in making the case that it is a silly lesson, I've also indicated what my view is concerning why things happened the way they did in the UK. Jeremy Corbyn just made a huge mistake. He didn't have sufficient skill at the practical politics. I think Bernie has a lot more skill at that, perhaps because he's been out in the wilderness for so long. Of course, Jeremy Corbyn was out in the wilderness too for a very long time. But Bernie is still out in the wilderness, still not the standard bearer of one of the major parties. Anyway, off to some of the other topics that I wanted to talk about today. The next is an article by Owen Higgins. It's called, quote, "Sick to My Stomach," unquote. Explosive report details ICE had negligence in medical care for detained children resulted in deaths and preventable surgeries. This was written by Owen Higgins, Common Dreams, a staff writer. I'm going to put this onto clearly now so you can see it more clearly. And we can't see the picture anymore. So let me show you the photo first. It's really a photo. A young migrant girl sits on the floor as her father, recently released from federal detention with other Central American asylum seekers, gets a bus ticket at a bus depot on June 11, 2019 in McAllen, Texas. Okay, let me go to Clearly now. It just tugs at you. Reporting from BuzzFeed News Thursday evening exposed how President Donald Trump's immigration policies led to 4 deaths and preventable surgeries for children held in the administration's detention regime, including one 8-year-old boy whose forehead was partially removed. Quote, I am sick to my stomach, said activist Sophie Elman-Golan of the report's allegations. Reporter Hamid Ali Aziz broke the story based on an internal Department of Homeland Security whistleblower report he obtained about conditions for immigrants detained by ICE. The report is here, so there's a PDF that comes along with the article that gives the report. And he tweeted about it. Okay, the tweet is there. I basically have already read the tweet. Quote, the allegations appear in a DHS memo obtained by BuzzFeed News containing reports of detainees being given some meds, okay, that were incorrect, suffering from delays in treating withdrawal symptoms, and one who was allowed to become so mentally stable he lacerated his own penis and required surgery, unquote. Ali Aziz said of the report on Twitter. According to Ali Aziz's reporting, the allegations were laid out in a March 20th memorandum signed by Cameron Quinn, but DHS's Officer for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, and sent to top ICE leadership. The memo describes the whistleblower as someone within the ICE Health Service Corps or the IHSC, which provides medical care and oversight for detainees in the agency's custody. BuzzFeed News does not know the person's identity. The allegations in the DHS memo, if corroborated, are a cry from someone working for ICE, echoing what advocates, lawsuits, and other media reports have been saying for years. The medical care ICE provides and oversees for immigrants in private and local jails could be very bad. Advocacy group advocacy group Latino Victory opined that the memo's allegations were just examples of what ICE is meant to do under the president. Quote, ICE is operating exactly as the Trump administration wants it to when migrants are being so violently neglected, unquote, the group said. In a call to action, the immigrant youth organization United We Dream noted there's blame to go around for the treatment of migrants by the federal government. Quote, while horrific torture like this occurs inside immigration concentration camps, Democrats and Republicans are moving forward on funding Trump's white supremacist agenda, unquote, said by United We Dream. That's absolutely true, of course. Look what happened in the last about few days when the Democrats compromised with the Republicans on Trump's agenda and passed many essential parts of it. Quote, these aren't isolated events, unquote, said Immigration Legal Services nonprofit by Races. quote, this is systematic and it's happening across the country. Quote, we must hashtag free them all and hashtag end detention before it's too late, unquote. So I just thought you should know about that. We've known that this is a terrible thing, but now there is an official government report actually coming out of ICE that actually documents some of the atrocities that are going on, and they do make us sick to our collective stomach and our individual stomachs. Finally, I also wanted to cover what's happened with the USMCA trade deal. That is an article also appeared in Common Dreams, this one on Thursday, written by Jake Johnson, and the title is Democrats' USMCA trade deal with Trump a big win or a major misstep? Unquote. And there's a picture of Nancy Pelosi making ice with other Democrats speaking favorably about the U.S. MCA treaty, which is the NAFTA replacement that the Trump administration has been trying to put through and which the Democrats have now compromised on. Okay, the bill has yet to pass. I don't believe it's come to the floor yet, but they're trying to rush it through, at this point. If they rush it through, it will not be passed as a treaty. It will be passed as a congressional hyphen executive agreement, which means it will have been passed by majority vote, at least in both houses, and with the signature of the president on it. And this is significant because since it's a congressional executive agreement and not an actual treaty, it can be gotten rid of more easily or modified more easily. When Bernie Sanders comes into power in 2021, or someone else who wants to see an improvement to this treaty, I'm sorry, just said, it's not a treaty, who wants to see an improvement, in this trade agreement, they'll be free to negotiate, another one. Mexico and Canada may not want to negotiate with it, but the new president can simply rip it up and force a negotiation, especially if that president has the support of Congress, and as I suspect that at the beginning Bernie will have. So, what is this agreement like? Is it a major win for workers, or is it an economic nothing burger, quote unquote, that could have a devastating impact on the environment? Well, let's note that, to begin with, this trade agreement is an improvement over NAFTA. Let's see in what way. Going on with the article. Is it a shrewd political move by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi or a massive strategic blunder that hands Donald Trump a victory at the worst possible time? I tend to believe it is neither. It does improve the situation a bit. One very good thing it does is it gets rid of the ISDS clause, the Investor State Dispute Settlement Clause, which was in the US Mexico Canada Agreement. Therefore, we should be able to restore country of origin labeling, which was declared invalid under NAFTA. In other words, the Canadians sued under NAFTA to try to prevent us from labeling their beef exports to the United States as originating in Canada rather than in the United States. Okay, and they won that suit. They won that suit under ISDS, and we had to repeal country of origin by labeling laws. As a result, our Congress was made to do that. Okay, now Congress will be free to once again pass those laws. Going on. The deal was met with mixed reactions from organized labor, environmentalists, and also progressive commentators, with some hailing the trade pact as a necessary upgrade from the status quo, and others condemning it as an all-around disaster. As I've already said, I think that it's certainly a necessary upgrade from the status quo, but not a great upgrade from the status quo. And it is not an all around disaster, though it may be a political disaster, but it's not a disaster from the standpoint of the substance of the agreement. Winona Howder of Food and Water Action said, quote, the USMCA is nothing more than a NAFTA 2.0, and it spells a disaster for food safety, air and water quality, and climate change in America. There's some truth to that. In other words, this agreement definitely has to be strengthened, okay? But it's better than leaving NAFTA in place. It just means that the new president will have to come in again and renegotiate it. Anyway, Pelosi, flanked by a group of House Democrats, announced the agreement on Tuesday, just minutes after the Speaker joined Representatives Jerry Nadler and Adam Schiff in unveiling two articles of impeachment that charge Trump with abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. AFL-CIO President Richard Trumka, who was closely involved with the USMCA negotiations, endorsed the pact immediately as a, quote, vast improvement over NAFTA, which caused deep harm to U.S., Canadian, and Mexican workers while undermining key environmental and consumer protections. Quote, make no mistake, we demanded a trade deal that benefits workers and fought every single day to negotiate that deal, and now we have secured an agreement that working people can proudly support, unquote, said Trumka. The USMCA is far from perfect, but there is no denying that the trade rules in America will now be fairer because of our hard work and perseverance, unquote. Yes, but that doesn't mean we can proudly support what was passed. We fought every single day. Well, they fought every single day. They got something. That's the best that can be said. And Trump just said, I am grateful to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and our allies in the USMCA working group, along with Senate champions like Sherrod Brown and Ron Wyden, for standing strong with us throughout this process as we demanded a truly enforceable agreement. Yes, Ms. Sherry Brown and Ron Wyden, the two weak sisters of the progressive group in the Senate. The Economic Policy Institute, a left leaning think tank that's aligned with labor interests, which means they get labor money, offered a slightly less positive assessment, but ultimately concluded the deal is, quote, better than the alternatives, unquote. Sounds exactly like what people were saying about the ACA when that passed. In a blog post Tuesday, EPI's Thea Lee and Robert Scott predicted the agreement, which has not yet been released in full. So, of course, we don't know exactly what it says, right? Quote, will in no way offset or reverse the massive devastation caused by the original NAFTA, unquote. Quote, despite these concerns, the USMCA may yield benefits for workers in a few industries such as glass and steel, and it may result in significant improvements in labor rights for Mexican workers. At the end of the day, the USMCA is the best of a set of bad choices. Again, I think that's probably true. And since the Democrats were not in control of Congress, uh, then maybe it wasn't such a bad deal. But on the other hand, if Nancy Pelosi had been willing to bargain harder, maybe she could still have gotten a better agreement. Her disposition on these things is, in most cases, to cave and to compromise for much less than she can get. Trump needed this deal. He needed to be able to say he did something when it came to NAFTA. It was politically unacceptable for him to go forward without having a revision to NAFTA that he can propagandize about. Nancy Pelosi handed him this victory. I think she needed to exact a higher price. Quote, the USMCA is nothing more than NAFTA 2.0, and it spells disaster for food safety, air and water quality, and climate change in America. Winona Howder, Executive Director of Food and Water Action, said in a statement Wednesday, quote, the USMCA is not a trade deal. It is an attack on public health and the climate. Congress must reject the USMCA or we'll be looking at a future of irreversible environmental disaster on unsafe food, water, and air with no end in sight, unquote. And that, okay, is probably largely true, but it doesn't necessarily imply that Congress ought to have said no to the USMCA, and specifically Pelosi. It still may be that if they had exacted a higher price, okay, and gotten a better deal, that might have served us better until the time, okay, when Bernie could get a really good deal. Anyway, quote again, if you're calling a president illegitimate and corrupt, you can't then give him the big wins he will need when he goes into key states he gets to brag about his victories, said progressive strategist Rebecca Katz. I think Katz was right about that. Dan West, the senior advocate for the Natural Resources Defense Council, echoed Howder's assessment and said any passable trade agreement must include strong protections for the climate. A key point, quote, while the details are still secret, West said, all indications are that the revised NAFTA pact fails this key climate test, and we will be forced to oppose it. According to Lori Wallach, director of Public Citizens Global Trade Watch, while labor unions and consumer advocates want serious improvements in the deal that should not be understated, nobody should walk away thinking that Trump or the Democrats have achieved anything close to a progressive trade agreement with the USMCA. In a detailed statement, Wallach, who, by the way, is, if I had to pick out one person worldwide, okay, who I would pick out as the most essential expert on global trade treaties and making them fair, okay, and making them actually more progressive, I would say that it is Lori Wallach, who's been studying this for decades now, working this beat for Global Citizen, okay, for decades. She's terrific. The best feature of the new NAFTA is the gutting of Investor State Dispute Settlement, ISDS. Using this regime, corporations have extracted almost $400 million from North American taxpayers after attacks on environmental and health policies before tribunals of 3 corporate lawyers. That a U.S. pact largely eliminates extreme ISDS protections for foreign investors and anti-democratic tribunals sends a signal worldwide about the illegitimacy of the ISDS regime. And that's so important because we have lots and lots of bilateral treaties that were negotiated between the 1970s and now, which all have ISDS clauses in them. And the multilateral treaties we have, and the ones we've been trying to negotiate of late, have all had ISDS sections in them, have all provided for ISDS. It has been a disaster for nations all over the world, and we go along with it again and again and again. With this agreement, we're beginning to see the end of the ISDS. And if you want to know how terrible ISDS has been, I give a pretty extensive analysis of this in my book, Declarations, okay, of Dependence. Which is my first book on trade. You'll find it at my website at josephmfirestone.com. It provides an MMT perspective on trade agreements and specifically on the TPP and related agreements that were being pushed at the time in 2015 and 2016. And so you may be interested in that book. It's a Kindle ebook, and you can find descriptions of it on my website at josephmfirestone.com. Beyond the specific policy details of the USMCA, there were progressives who expressed concerns about the political implications of handing Trump a victory with the 2020 general election less than a year away, and as the impeachment process moves ahead. It's bad policy and worse politics, said Adam Gentleson, public affairs director at advocacy group Democracy Forward. And Yvette Simpson, CEO of the progressive organization Democracy for America, called the trade pact, quote, a major strategic error by the Democratic leadership. Quote, swing district Democrats won't win a single new vote by agreeing to pass this trade deal, said Simpson. Meanwhile, Donald Trump will be spending the next 11 months bragging about the trade agreement he alone, quote unquote, passed, unquote. In an interview with The Hill, Rebecca Katz also worried that the deal will give Trump a political boost. If you're calling a president illegitimate and corrupt, you can't then give him the big wins that he will need when he goes into key states. He gets to brag about his victories, unquote. Trump has already begun doing precisely that. Speaking to reporters on the South Lawn of the White House on Tuesday, he called the MCA, quote, one of the greatest trade deals ever made for our country, unquote, and claimed Democrats only agreed to the deal because they are, quote, embarrassed, unquote, by the impeachment process. And he said, quote, I call that the silver lining to impeachment because without the impeachment, they would never have approved it, in my opinion. And the reason is they wanted to muffle down the impeachment because they were embarrassed by it and they couldn't get the votes. And that's exactly what happened, unquote. And that's a ridiculous interpretation because Pelosi caves all the time, impeachment or no impeachment. She caves for crumbs. She's an expert at caving for crumbs. Trump repeated the claim during a campaign rally in Hershey, Pennsylvania on Tuesday. Trump pushes a ludicrous conspiracy theory about why Pelosi agreed to USMCA today. Quote, it plays down the impeachment because they're embarrassed by the impeachment, and our poll numbers have gone through the roof because of her stupid impeachment, unquote. This was tweeted by Aaron by Rupar at AT Rupar on December 11, 2019. Few lawmakers have spoken out in opposition to the agreement. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, one of the most outspoken progressives in Congress, told reporters Tuesday that she is, quote, leaning no, unquote, on the sweeping trade pact. Quote, I do also represent a working class district, she said, and I certainly believe that a Democratic president would get a better deal, actually negotiate a better deal, unquote. Senators Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, both leading contenders for the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination, are reportedly expected to oppose the agreement. The senators have been critical of the USMCA throughout the negotiation process, but neither has commented on the pact since the deal was announced on Tuesday. Quote, the NAFTA treaty that Trump has renegotiated with Mexico will still allow companies like General Motors to send our jobs to Mexico, unquote, Sanders said during a rally in Michigan in April, and he's right. In a speech last November at American University in Washington, Warren said, quote, Trump's deal won't stop the serious and ongoing harm NAFTA causes American workers, unquote. Quote, again, it won't stop outsourcing, it won't raise wages, and it won't create jobs. It's NAFTA 2.0, unquote, said Warren. In her assessment, Wallach said, a key takeaway from the USMCA negotiations is that concerns of progressives can no longer be ignored after years of corporate domination of trade talks. Here, Wallach is taking the long view, of course. But she said, simply making NAFTA better is a low bar, and, quote, not the same as negotiating a truly progressive trade agreement from scratch, unquote. The USMCA, she concluded, is, quote, not the template for future agreements, but establishes the floor from which we will continue to advocate for a new model of trade and globalization that puts people and the planet but first. And so there we are. So let me go back to my basic view. Oh, that response was pretty quick. I'm going to go back to Facebook and check out what your comments have been there. So I see there were a good many comments tonight. That's great. Let me begin to take them on. Steve Wolfbrand said Bernie is winning and will soon overtake Biden in South Carolina. Seal the deal. Steve said they announced the results within seconds of the poll closing. Exit polls. We need that. Hillary canceled exit polls. Too much truth. It wasn't just Hillary, it was the media responding to Hillary. They didn't want the exit polls. As I recall, I don't think Trump wanted them at that time either. Susan says, how would you respond to a union member who doesn't support M for All? What I would do actually is, first, I would have had my research team long ago have prepared responses from other union members who did support Medicare for All, stating why they supported it and why it was better than what they had now. Secondly, what I would also do, if I were going to a place to talk to union members, before I went there, I would find a union member who was in favor of Medicare for All, who belonged to their very union, and who could give them the reasons why she favored Medicare for All in relation to her own experience. Now, as it happens, there is a lady who's a member of the Culinary Union, which was the union that was heckling Bernie just a few days ago, about this. And she wrote an article after the heckle and went into detail about all of the vulnerabilities that she experienced under the very good health care, generally very good health care, that union had actually negotiated for themselves. The insurance wasn't enough to protect her, and she's encountered all kinds of healthcare disasters and financial disasters, as a result of that. And in an article she's written, she points out how many instances she would have been helped if the Medicare for All bill was in effect at that time. So that's how I would respond. I'd be ready for such attacks. And I'd be able to reel off examples from union members based on their experiences, explaining to the union members who were doing the heckling why a lot of their fellow union members support Medicare for all. Read them chapter and verse. Ask them what they would do if this happened to them or that happened to them. How well would their policies cover that? Wouldn't they have to do this? Wouldn't they have to do that? Wouldn't they have to do the other thing in order to get care? Whereas under Medicare for all you got to do is go see a doctor, give the doctor your card, and that's it. So that's how I would answer it. Okay, I was going to cover an article today, which I won't have time to do today, but I promise I'll cover it next time. I will cover the article written by the Culinary Workers Union, providing her own answer to the culinary workers who were heckling Bernie Sanders. Okay, says, tell him about the labor strike in the UAW in Ohio. Union workers were striking, and GM took away their health care just like that. Right? That can happen all over the country. In any industry, they can take away their health care just like that if they happen to be striking. Kay is right. They use it as a weapon now. They did in that particular GM strike. They used it against one of the still most powerful unions in the country, the UAW. And they got away with it. They got away with doing that. But they strengthened Bernie Sanders' case for Medicare for all. Yes, I would make the point if unions don't have to fight for medical insurance, they're free to fight for other benefits, including higher wages, especially higher wages. Especially higher wages. My daughter Devorah has joined. Hi, honey. And Susan Eldridge says, Bernie withdrew his endorsement of Cenk Uygur. I think that was wise. People are of two minds about it. Okay, there's no doubt that the things that Cenk said some time ago, before he was a progressive, were very hurtful and indicated a misogynic, what they indicated was the state of mind, of a misogynist at that time, who later claims that he's reformed and changed his thinking, and many of whose colleagues and associates in the business would probably support him, in that. But I think what Bernie was doing was he was making the calculation. He didn't want to be having to defend his campaign by trying to defend what Cenk had done 20 years or so ago. He didn't want to be actually placed on the defensive about that so that he would have to explain it. As it is, he's on the defensive now because he'll probably have to explain why he endorsed Cenk in the first place. But he can probably give, a short explanation of that. He could have said, well, in recent years he's been extremely progressive and very aggressive as a progressive, and he's done a lot for the movement and will probably do a lot in the future. But this campaign is about the issues. It's about Medicare for all. It's about the Green New Deal. I didn't want to make it about but Cenk Uygur's record about 20 years ago. Uh, we did some research on Cenk, of course, before we did the endorsement, but that's a while back now. And our research team simply missed that. And so we gave him the endorsement because he has a great record in recent years. But that probably ends the explanation. That's a reasonable explanation. Okay, he can end it. On the negative side, though, uh, okay, I think that Bernie has been less than stellar in supporting allies of his who have gotten into uncomfortable positions. I'm thinking here of Tim Canova and also Tulsi Gabbard and now Cenk as well. So Bernie is careful about supporting people who have been stalwart allies of him in the past when they get into difficulties. And I don't think that's something that he wants to get a reputation for. Anyway, going to some other comments. Steve says Bernie didn't want to get bogged down in this Cenk stuff. Yeah, that's true. Kay says, I live in a redneck trailer park now, so I'm not in low-income housing, dealing with bugs and mold and bad water, but not really where I want to be either. I can't afford another dog, or I sure would. Don't want to bring a dog into this life I have now anyway. Ooh. Jim Bird says, sometimes it takes time to become awoke. Susan Eldridge says, there's still an echo. Sorry, Susan, I did my best. Steve says, gives the advice to Kay. Okay, so adopt an abused dog. Kay says, I guess I will, Steve. I love you back. I have nowhere else to go. I laugh out loud. When I lost my best friend in the world, Sasha, who was my profile pic, that was it for me. She was 14 years old, and sadly, animal meds are no better than people. And very expensive. Steve says, I'm old too. Let's go out fighting. Love you, Kay. Kay says, thank you, Steve. I'm still here, still hoping for Bernie as president to try to turn this mess our country is in around. Yeah, me too. He says to Kay, I need you to keep fighting. Kay says, yes, it is. Not homeless yet, but poor seniors like me are always right on the edge of it. Lost my late hubby almost 4 years ago to cancer, then lost my beautiful wildlife habitat acres in the woods in southeast North Carolina because on my Social Security I couldn't afford it anymore. Lost everything I ever worked for in my life since I was 16 years old. If I would have had a handful of pills, I would be gone too. So I resemble that. Steve says both parties suck, Doc. Yeah, I agree. Our lifespans are going down. Death from despair, suicide, overdose, homelessness is very sad. There should be hundreds here. Please share. They will learn the hard way as we have, I guess. Bernie is the only one out there that can help me get a life. worth living in my old age, so I will vote for him for sure. If the DNC screws him out of it again, it's on them when we lose. Let's make him sorry if we lose. Kay is sick of voting for the lesser of two evils, as are we all. He said, people can change. I voted for Clinton twice and Obama twice. I was stupid. Yep, and that just shows how much Cenk has changed. He used to be a repug years ago when he said some nasty things. And Susan says, yes, they are still on good terms. Cenk gets it. Yes, he does. Cenk was grateful, said he's not taking on endorsements. And he says, yes, I figure that Cenk knows that too. Steve says, Jeremy wanted another referendum. The election was the referendum. He kind of insulted his own people. Yep. Susan says to Kay, yes, it is sad. They will do anything they can to take Bernie down. Kay says, I guess that gets Bernie off the hook anyway. Sad it has to be that way, though. It is sad. It is very sad. Because it might hurt Cenk's campaign in that district, and that district really needs Cenk. Susan says, I agree, but Bernie can't take that chance. It would have brought too much negativity into the campaign. Also, Cenk said he wasn't going to accept any endorsements. Yeah, Cenk has been big about it. Kay says he's changed a lot. I like him now. Yeah, Cenk has done a lot of good things. He certainly would have been the best candidate in that race by far, and a great ally for Bernie to have in Congress. So it is a shame. Nikki says, it seemed to me Corbyn was trying to ignore the elephant in the room, the Brexit elephant in the room. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Kay says, I hate politics in this country anymore. SMH. I have been a political junkie my whole life, too. These days, it's way out of hand. Yeah, it's way out of hand. It is way out of hand. Excuse my cursor. Doesn't want to move. And just plain stupid most of the time. Yeah, a lot of attacks on Cenk for stuff he did a long time ago. It's a shame. It's really a shame. Well, we're still free to support Cenk. We don't have to worry about supporting him. Steve says, start a GoFundMe to adopt a dog. You'll get a lot of donations. Do it. Jim says, my wife's father used to treat his kids with veterinarian drugs. There were 15 kids in her family. Oh, my God. Andy Blair has joined. Jeffrey Ginter has joined. Hi, folks. How you doing? Jim says you have to keep an eye on the prize. No entanglements is the goal. The goal is utmost important. Steve says, Bernie, you want to get bogged down in this Cenk stuff. Yeah, that's very true. Yep, it's taken him 40 years. That's right. He looks back on those 40 years and he says, I want this. I want this. That's what he says to himself. Okay, so uh, please like, share, and subscribe to the YouTube video when it goes up. I really need subscribers, okay, on YouTube because I cannot possibly monetize my videos, okay, on YouTube, okay, until I get to 1,000 subscribers. So please, okay, I need your help, okay, in this. Also, please become a patron at www.patreon.com/Joe_Firestone. Okay, I appreciate anything you can do to help me out. And I realize that we're all in tough straits. And don't worry if you're not in a position to help, because I think we all understand and empathize, okay, with one another in this respect. We're all, okay, in the same boat. 1,000 is the goal. What is the YouTube name? Thank you, Lana, for reminding me to provide the YouTube name. Hang on a second. I think if you search for Joseph Firestone, you'll get there. I'd give you the exact name myself, but my system is slow now. Okay, the channel is Joseph Firestone. Very straightforward. I guess I put up the channel in the old days. Didn't do much posting for a very long time on it, but okay, so oh, thank you, Barbara Reed. There's the channel, and you can see the name. And I now have 31 subscribers because Barbara Reed just subscribed. Barbara Reed, who had been here, just subscribed. Thank you, Barbara. Okay, let me post one more thing for you as well. Guess I screwed that up. No wonder. Okay, So here's my website. Okay, here's my website. And if you scroll down, on my website, you'll find the covers, okay, of my ebooks. And the ebook I was referring to earlier that deals with the trade treaties is Declarations of Dependence, Trade Tyranny, Sovereignty, and Democracy. That was published in 2015. It's a Kindle ebook. And another Kindle ebook on trade. It's entitled "Who Needs Balanced Trade? Who Needs Balanced Who Needs Balanced Budgets?" And that book is an MMT-based take on trade policy and also on budgets, with the end goal of public purpose, okay, in mind. And so you might want to take a look at those books. Okay, I also have a number of others. 2 books on real fiscal responsibility. 1 book on austerity, Greece's debt crisis, and the theft of democracy. And a book that doesn't deal directly with economics. The name of it, okay, is Riskonomics. Its subtitle is "Reducing Risk by Killing Your Worst Ideas." I don't know what led me to get into all this here, but anyway, you can find these things on my website, as well as some interesting blog posts. So thank you for your attention. Let me check one last time. Oh, Dolores, thank you very much for sharing both the Facebook live stream and the YouTube video. I really appreciate that. And Steve asked me if I like Tim Black. Yeah, very much. I like Tim Black very much. I watch Tim Black just about every day. Also, Jamarl Thomas is a special favorite of mine. I religiously watch but Jamarl too. And also the Mikasa Sukasa people. Okay. I like them all. Okay. Nikki says, I subscribe to you too, Joe. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you very much. Okay. Lana says, maybe you should do a super chat. Okay, like Jordan. I don't think that one is eligible to do super chats. Okay, I don't think one is eligible to monetize, which includes the super chats, until you've reached 1,000 subscribers. That's why I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, so that I can do super chats from time to time. Thank you, Steve. And Russ says, I've got to call it a night. See you again soon. Thank you, Russ. Steve said, would you prefer we watch on YouTube? Well, okay, the YouTube is not a live stream for now. It's just a video, okay, I put up. So if you want to be involved in the live streams, for now, you have to come here. Now, over time, if the subscriptions to YouTube start to build up, if they get into a range of, let's say, 100 or more on YouTube, then I will most probably shift over to YouTube as the site for my live streams, and then post my videos to Facebook. But for now, most of my audience is here, and so I'd like you to have access to the live streams. So until people get used to the fact that I'm also on YouTube and I build enough of a following there, I'll probably be live streaming over there. Oh, I see what happened. Okay, there we are again. Another one to add to the excellent list of commentators is Garland by Nixon. But thank you. I think I've seen one or two of Garland Nixon's shows. Kay says, don't believe us alone here on Facebook, Joe. We love you here. I'm not going to leave you alone, on Facebook. If I do start to do live streams, on YouTube, I will try to find some better software so I can simultaneously stream, or alternatively, what I'm going to do then is to stream, on YouTube, but then when I post the video on Facebook, what I'll do is host a watch party. So you can see the video and still comment on it in real time, and I can join in the comments with you, in real time, which should be a lot of fun as well. Steve says we need to grow this show. Thank you, Steve. I used to have a lot more people come, but I was with the RP group then, and they had a very effective share army. And so, yes, I like Rising on LTV also. Yeah, I really like Rising. I'll tell you, in one way or another, I spend a whole day preparing for this show. It might not always seem like it, but there's such a huge amount of different kinds of news that I have something to say about it, that I think I have something to comment on, that I find myself in this overwhelming stream of different things happening over a whole day. And my biggest problem is winnowing down that stream into a few pieces of news to talk about. That's the biggest problem I have in getting ready for a show. I don't come at these shows with an idea of what I'm going to talk about on a particular day. Of course, sometimes, occasionally, okay, I'll do that. But what I'm mostly trying to do is to bring you deeper perspectives on what's going on currently. I want to give you in-depth commentary on what is going on currently. Uh, and so that's the way I spend my days. I go through all kinds of things, go through all kinds of articles. Okay, and in the background, I'm watching live streams. So Lana says, maybe you should do a super chat, okay, like Jordan will, as I said before. I would certainly do super chats if I had the 1,000 subscribers. That's why it's important to get to that level. Steve says, but Rising is rising. Yeah, yeah, Rising is a great show. It's very carefully prepared, but of course, I'm sure they have the resources. Apart from Crystal and Sager being very, very good people themselves, they probably have a staff of researchers there helping them to pick out what they're going to talk about each day. Crystal, no, you have the spelling right, Kay. Was booted from MSNBC because she was too liberal after they went corporate, just like Cenk and Ed Schultz, too. Yeah, that's right. And they were not the only ones. I mean, this goes back really a long way. It goes back to their actually booting but Phil Donahue at the time of after 9/11 when he opposed the war. They got rid of Phil Donahue. I mean, it was awful. They've gotten rid of so many very, very good people because they've gone corporate. Yes. Okay. I knew Crystal was too liberal. I knew she was too liberal at the time. I was doing a lot of of blog writing at that time, and I would watch that show or the panel show that she was also on, and I noticed at the time of the comments on the Piketty book on the Capitol. Uh, but she was on a panel that was talking over the Piketty book, and she was completely in sync with it. She really knew what was going on, and she was very, very different from all of the other people who were on that show. Yeah, right. Okay, Dylan Ratigan as well was replaced because sometimes poor Dylan told the truth, and he told it in a very animated and angry way. And there was one show in particular where he laid everybody out. And after that, they fired him because he shamed them all on that show. I saw it at the time. Man, it was really something. It was really something. So anyway, Crystal is back, and she's doing great stuff. Okay, is Garland is Gray and Convo Couch. Also, Dolores says I add hashtags to the shares on Twitter. Thank you, Dolores. That's wonderful. But don't worry, I'm not going to leave you alone. Okay, so I think it's time to say goodnight for tonight, unless I've missed some comments. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for cheering every once in a while. It's really great. Oh, God. Good night, folks. And Steve says, you have no idea how much truth you are spreading. Now, this is the new media. I know it is. I hope I'm spreading a lot of truth. I started out actually live streaming only, okay, on MMT issues. Because as some of you may know, I'm extremely well versed, okay, on those issues. Okay, and I love them as well. But I have an extremely broad background in political science and history and psychology, but also philosophy of science. So, okay, I wanted a show that was much broader than just the MMT aspect, though that, of course, is still a very central concern of mine. In particular, the public purpose aspect, okay, of MMT. That's why I now have the Center for the public purpose, okay, that I'm affiliated with. It's not much of a center as yet, but it has a very broad mandate, has a lot to do with MMT, but is broader than that. So anyway, I am going to end this now. Have a very good night. I'll be back tomorrow, Saturday night. I'll be back at in the 9 to 9:10 time frame. God willing, and the creeks don't rise, as the old saying goes.